scam. This idea that just do what you love, it's a scam. That way of thinking, because that's not how it works. You can't just simply be 23 years old and decide that you want to be the leader of a company and that, oh, you just have to go and do it. There are paths to excellence. There are paths to growth. I certainly am not the person I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And the things that I have the capacity to do today are quite different. And there's no way to hack that. Maybe somebody who's 23 is just so talented and so wise that they're just capacities such that they can do similar things to me today. But the message, just do what you love, go for it, it's not the whole story.
This is the Human Future Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and spirituality with some of the world's brightest minds. Together, we paint a vision of the desirable future and discuss the actionable steps to make that vision a reality. And now, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome, Myk. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking the time and coming all the way here to Edgewater from not too far away from where you are now. Yeah, excited for our conversation. Even pre-recording, we already had some really cool deep dives.
So basic, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'm excited to dive deeper into it. I think for the listeners to have a better understanding who is in front of me, why don't you give a short current story that you care? What's your story up to now that makes sense of how you look at the world in a way?
So it's a bit, okay. It's a bit about me as well, right? Like
a little bit of a background.
Got it. That's cool.
Yeah.
I got one.
Yeah.
I have a lot of material. If you'll see. Never ending material.
So yeah, what does that look like? What's that story?
Are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't, okay. So yeah, my background is, it's both, I think, distinct, but also very relatable because a lot of people have similar backgrounds in the sense of I'm from a family of immigrants. We came to the US, and just like many immigrants, there's a certain set of values and expectations placed on us, i.e. that we would do really well because we came here for a reason. Our parents sacrificed so much and they wanted the best for us. And many people in the US are in the same boat where we honored our parents. This is what we grew up with, and we did the things. Like we got the grades, we honored our families, and many of us became successful. The way it turned out for me was I feel like I was misdiagnosed as a child as a business guy.
Okay.
Makes total sense in this context. I was taught from when I was growing up that I was going to be in business, and I did the things that led me in that direction. Meanwhile, as I've aged and learned myself more, I'm more of a creative. So now I find myself many years later, having gone down the path of finance and business school, really wanting to be more in the creative space. But not all is lost, because in this way of being raised, I was able to develop my business acumen, my structure, and things that I think serve me very well. In that now I have a way to have my creativity interact with a structure and a systematic way of looking at the world that I wouldn't have had. Right? If I had just doubled down on the creative and gone in that direction,
for sure,
I wouldn't be as balanced in this particular way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think similar to me, actually, I also went through the whole business journey, went to business school, did some corporate consulting tech work, and also discovered that I am more of a creator. I'm super grateful though that I have gone that route, because it's in a way a superpower that allows you to manifest faster, because you're more structured with your thinking. You have a certain approach to doing things. Is just very valuable, I think.
Yeah, and I think if even generalizing more beyond that, I think that as people, it serves us very well to train and do things outside of our zones of genius, or our areas of comfort. If all we ever did was to do the things that we love to do, we would be really good at those in particular and get far. but we would be missing out on so much of life. Because as we were just speaking prior to this, there are so many aspects of the world that are important, but also, in the terms of creativity, you actually draw from different aspects. That's what creativity is. You pull in from, world events, from philosophy, from your experiences, from your relationships, from every single corner of the world. So I think it's really important to have those disparate experiences and especially the trainings and the discipline, the things that take discipline and take practice. Because then they come together in ways that are way more interesting, where the sum is much more than just the parts.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so I tend to gravitate towards doing more things that I like, and then also recognizing that without doing something that you quote unquote don't like, even being disciplined, it could also be interpreted as doing something that you wouldn't do otherwise for like a long period of time that actually is a very needed and meaningful experience being here. It's not, we can't just get into the point where we're doing only things that we like and we are at our maximum growth capacity, or like we're not probably growing as fast as we could be by doing certain things that we maybe didn't want to do or something like that.
Totally. And maybe I'll say this like a few times, but I have a way of talking about things in terms of it's a scam. Okay. So this idea that, in this like new economy or like new way of thinking, like just do what you love. Like it's a scam, like that way of thinking, because that's not how it works. You can't just simply be 23 years old and decide that you want to be the leader of a company and that, you just have to go and do it. It's a scam. I mean, there are paths to excellence. There are paths to growth. I certainly am not the person I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And the things that I have capacity to do today are quite different. And there's no way to hack that. There's literally no way to hack that. Maybe somebody who's 23 is just so talented and so wise that their path, that their just capacity is such that they can do similar things to me today. But the message, I think, of just do what you love, like go for it, is it's not the whole story.
It's the whole story, yeah. But I think there is, though, a balance that you get to decide what's your balance between doing how much you love and infusing it with things that got to be done, but you might not want to do them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying at all that don't do the things you love, like get after it, but also realize that in the service of pursuing something that you love, there's going to be many steps, many actions, many tasks, many conversations that you're just not going to love, right? And what's going to keep you in the vibration of moving towards it, of what is like that you actually really want to do it. You're like, I'm going to commit my life to X. I'm going to commit my life to artificial intelligence. I'm going to commit my life to service. I'm going to commit my life to my family, whatever. Then get after it. And then the more love and the more passion you have for that will be your willingness and your capacity for putting up with the hard stuff. To get to there. So from that standpoint, it's I feel like that's not the message that I hear a lot.
I understand. Yeah. There's this notion of grinding, which is a fairly popular notion of people just putting basically brute forcing to their success. And I think there's usefulness to that. This works under the assumption that there is something to grind, that there is the medium through which you navigate reality is pretty dense and you have to grind through it. I think there is an alternative way of navigating life, is being more like water that sips through, but then combining it to the earlier topic of you have to sometimes grind potentially. Maybe it's not just all water. Sometimes there's no other way to get through a certain situation by just grinding a little bit, or maybe a lot.
I really love that. I mean, I love that you brought up grinding, and that assumes that reality is very dense. And wow, that's a big insight. I'll have to think about that. I really like it. I agree. I think this notion of grinding also is a scam. Just kind of like for me, entrepreneurship. We've been taught like that entrepreneurship is something to be held up, and it's like the highest form for over the past 20, 25 years, 30 years. It's the highest form of professional outcomes and achievement, and everybody should be an entrepreneur. Total scam. Because most entrepreneurs, first of all, are not successful. They're not happy. They're not healthy. They're not well balanced. They don't have love in their lives. They are committed to some ideas or some projects, and that can be worthy, but that's super one-dimensional, and probably not why we're on this earth to start like an app, right? That probably most people won't be impacted in a way, might make you some money. But anyways, coming back to, so that's just something about entrepreneurship that I decided to toss in. But getting back to,
maybe you can put a advice though for those. So if it's not, don't pursue entrepreneurship. There are the better ways. Don't think that entrepreneurship is the ultimate life challenge that everyone have to go through. What would be the alternative? So
I've been sitting a lot with just different concepts, right? My life is very much experienced now at the intersection of spirituality and how it means to bring spiritual concepts into life. Are they relevant? To what extent? Do they provide insight, solace? Do they make you more productive? Do they improve outcomes? And one of the ideas right now that I was given the other quite recently has to do with service. So being in service. So there is something very massive, right, about going through life with this energy of being in service. You could be an entrepreneur and be in service. You could say, I'm doing this thing like for the benefit of this kind of people, or for the benefit of the world, or for the benefit of solving this particular issue or problem. And being in service, there's a lot of research around this, around service, around how it also improves your own well-being, mental health, spiritual. It's a mission, right? You have a mission. You're like, there's a reason for me to be here. There's a reason for me to be here, and it energizes me. And I think that maybe is part of my thing with entrepreneurship. I feel like the grind in entrepreneurship, it depletes. I mean, I speak 100% from experience. And those who know me know I've been grinding longer than most. I know we'll talk about Modern Home, but one of the reasons that Modern Home is the only spiritual wellness, mindfulness community in Miami is because I've been grinding. I outgrinded everybody. I don't know the term, outground. Not just in Miami. In New York, in LA, all these groups and businesses have started, have raised capital, and they've all gone away. And there's the grind, and then there's also just grit. Maybe there's like a distinction of just tenacity, grit, commitment. We can go back to those topics. But the thing about service, coming back to service, is that service energizes. And I've heard this way of considering like service to the highest, service in service of the highest. Like, what does that even mean? Like service in the kind of to the highest echelon, or in the highest way of looking at it, was given to me in this way. 4 things. Serves me, with a capital S and a capital M. Serves you, capital S, capital Y. Serves us, capital S, capital U. And serves all, capital S, capital A. This is a big statement. And I don't know necessarily how many things fall into this this heuristic or this way of looking at it. But man, what if? What if as an entrepreneur, as a creator, as a man, as a woman going through life saying, how about applying this to the things that are important to me? Like, how can whatever I do serve me, right? We have to like, and make money and have a livelihood and do the things. How can it serve you? Like that you could be, you know, the audience, the market, your friends, anything. Yeah. How can it serve us, like us as a community, right? How can it improve the lives of us kind of collectively and serve all as like, you know, that's a big one. But to what extent can what we work on be relevant and be supportive to people that we don't even know, right? To whether it's, you know, to people, to the planet, to humanity, to justice, to ideals. And I love it. I mean, this is a new thing that was shared with me, and I'm just kind of rolling it around in my mind, but I think it's super cool.
I like it. Yeah. It's basically tying it back to the entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship sometimes could be this like an attractor, like a little carrot that motivates people to move in that direction. You're proposing an alternative carrot or an alternative motive or an attractor to which you're attaching yourself, and you're being pulled where you don't need to spend much energy to navigate in that direction. And so entrepreneurship might be more like an illusory carrot. It's not a real goal. It's a goal set by society that it's like the highest version of success. If you succeed being an entrepreneur, you might be like considered as like the most successful person in your domain. But what you're proposing, which I really like, is more aligning yourself around service for all, and no matter what you do, that should be on that same line. Because being an entrepreneur, I think you can get lost in what that means and what you're doing. You might be misaligned to the actual service, what you're.
Yeah. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's like, what's your north node, right? What's magnetic north for you,
right,
as an entrepreneur? And like that needs to be asked by everybody individually. And if it's not aligned, if like, let's just say, for example, it's making money. And I'm sure that there's some entrepreneurs that's their motivation.
Yeah.
But as you go deeper into personal work, into anything, I mean, it's not even spirituality. You just talk to psychologists, talk to what all the data shows.
Right.
Ultimately, like that's not going to bring you satisfaction.
Yeah, it will cover some insecurities of yours, but that would be it.
Yeah. So everybody who's into that, who wants to create professionally. I don't know how to describe entrepreneurship, but to create professionally, to create things out in the world. There is now ample evidence, both anecdotal and just like all of the empirical stuff that we've got, that says, like, you need a why. You know, Simon Sinek, right, has the book like "What About Why" or something like that. And yeah, so it's
yeah. What do you then think? What do we need to do today to raise more of entrepreneurial type or leader type with that why?
Yeah, I mean, what I think what's being asked for now is for people to look inward more, right? That's the basis of Modern Gnome, of my company, is to give people resources to take that inward journey. You know, what do you really want? Like what are your issues? Like, are those really your issues? Like, are you sure? Where do you really want to go? Like, do you really love this person, or do you love what they represent? You know, where do you want your impact to be? What do you, you know, how do you want to spend your days? What all of these things, all of these questions, they need to be asked. And there are tools and there are resources and there are protocols for self-inquiry that range from, you know, things like psychological tools to therapy tools to sacred medicine, i.e. psychedelics, so on and so on and so on. And I don't necessarily have preferences around it. And because I've been around so many of these different modalities, the key is the question. And the key is the true curiosity and the true commitment to the inquiry, right? Mm-hmm. Like to actually get down to it and ask those questions. And what happens is the answers are not necessarily what you would expect. It would be so easy if they were.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think they are easy. Oh, I already know. Mm-hmm. Oh, if I ask these questions, like I already assume that I know what's on the other side of these questions.
Right.
And so the hard thing is, and what a lot of people are not willing to do, right, is like give up the control of what the answers are going to be. But all of that stuff is very, very important for not just entrepreneurship, but for growing as a person, for being happy. Because I highly, especially the more that I've been doing this work over the years, the more people I've meeting and I see patterns and kind of behavior and patterns of the way that people are thinking and looking at things. And I don't know if you can really, it doesn't just happen. You don't just live an actualized life.
Yeah.
You don't.
Right.
The reason is we're handed down all of this cultural, societal programming that are not to our benefit. None of it's to our benefit. Right. If frankly, if you want to go there,
for sure.
It's none of it is no political decision, no healthcare decision, no media decision is taking into account the happiness of the individual, of the expressive nature of people, of the needs for safety and understanding and being seen that people have. Nothing is.
Yeah.
That means it's all in our hands. And which means that if you don't take the time and the energy to do the things, whatever the things are for you, you're not going to accidentally rub up against resources and experiences that lead you to being that bigger version of yourself.
Do you think there is a like a, how do you call it, like a wall or a filter that prevents people to recognize their big why, and the filter is, do you believe in your higher self, or do you believe in anything outside of the 3D world that all you have is your ego, most people would say. And until they really believe that the message, the meaningful message can come outside of what they know, they won't receive that message.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll start it with, our minds are limited. You only know what you know. Example is you're making a decision about, I don't know, where to go to dinner. And you say, oh, I like this restaurant. Let's go there. And then your friend is like, hey, I just looked on Google. They have 2-star reviews from 8,000 people and they're using like dog food. And you're like, actually, let's not go there.
Yeah.
It's a simple, I mean, I've never used that analogy before, or metaphor before, but the rationale is that you only know what you know. Mm-hmm. And the world is so vast. There's so much information. Mm-hmm. So to think that we actually know more than like a minuscule fraction of anything, whether or not you believe in God or higher source or higher power, there's more to know.
Yeah.
More to know about ourselves, more to know about our environments. And when you realize that, I think, at least as an intellectual person, maybe you hold on a little less to what you know. Mm. People are so certain, I know this. Mm-hmm. It says a little bit about where they're at. Just like if people hold on so much to what they know, given that analogy I just made for us, and one piece of information can knock their entire worlds askew. I'm not your actual dad.
Right.
Like you never know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That'll be. As you were saying it, and to my question, I started to recognize that maybe to be open to the message, the deep message of why you're here, or your deep why or purpose, might still come from the ego surrendering to a state of awareness. It's still like a physical process. Let's say you assume that your brain is this quantum computer, that you don't have full control over every little piece of what's happening in there. But you know that if you have almost like a fuzzy vision where you're not looking at something directly, you kind of disperse your attention and it's not grabbing onto something very sharp and precise. In that state, your brain tends to give you information that encapsulates a lot more variables that you, with the conscious mind, you can't even process. And then in that situation, you won't even need a recognition that there's a higher self. You could probably just say it's kind of the same thing, but from a scientific perspective, and that could still potentially be useful for people to surrender and say like, okay, my mind, just do your thing. Just I'm surrendering to the answers that will come from this kind of state of awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, if I got what you were saying correctly, is the mind it's just limited. The brain is the mind is just limited. That's all there is to it. I mean, we only know what we know, and there's so much that we don't know. So there's so much on the other side of it, and as long as we recognize that, to me, it's not. There's another part of this too, which is the mind is programmed with like a bunch of nonsense, right? That we didn't even choose. It's like our parents' prejudices, our parents' our parents' like belief systems. And it's like, that's cool. I mean, maybe it's cool. Your parents can believe a certain thing, but why does that have to mean that you have to believe that? So not only is our mind limited, but it's pre-programmed with a lot of stuff that we didn't even choose. So for me, in some ways, thinking about this like large existential like concepts of divinity and so on, like sure, I tend to think of it as more beliefs. Even like you choose, like if you want to choose to believe in a monotheistic God, you can have a great fucking life. Yeah. Right? You can live honorably. You can be connected to the source. You can feel great about things and feel like you have mission. And if you don't, you can maybe just love the fact that we're on this planet Earth and you love nature. And when you go out into nature and your nervous system relaxes, you're like, that's all I need. Right. Like I'm going to go camping and like take my kids camping and go to all the beautiful places in the world and like feel really enriched there. And there's a lot, like there's a lot of different approaches to it. I think that you don't have to choose, you don't have to necessarily believe in anything. It just, as long as you recognize, I suppose in another way, and it is spiritual concept, is like you recognize the magnitude of self, right? So there's this brain, cool, it's our program. Right. But if you believe that like you're bigger than that, whatever, like you're just bigger than that. Right. Maybe you're as big as, maybe you're everything, you know, and you take it to that. Maybe you're everything, and that brings you into the field of, you know, the things that are talked about in mysticism and New Age spirituality, perhaps in quantum physics. And there's some evidence around that, and people are doing their research. Yeah, I do think that everybody has capacity to find their way onto some path that feels good to them. I think that the thing that would keep people from that is certain beliefs around that prevent them. And some of those, again, are not their own beliefs. For sure. So they're like, oh, this is the right way, right? That's a tough belief to get over. Oh, if you don't X, like if you don't live a particular way, you're going to hell, or you're not going to get there. That it's really hard to, I don't know, to inspire those people, right, or to change,
to break through that rigidness.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because certain beliefs just fundamentally like are at odds with what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the life will meet them at some point in a strong enough force to break through that rigidness. Until then, TBD, they're on hold. And
I'll actually share like another framework that came to me around transformation and self-actualization. I came up with four different pillars or four different areas of it that I think are necessary for lasting change. Given Modern Om and what I do in the spiritual space and community and programming, one pillar of this is practice. You have to like do stuff like spiritual practice, inner work. That can be journaling. That can be meditation or breath work or walks or contemplation or listening to spiritual teachers and many more things. The practice part. One part is peak experiences. So kind of coming back to what you were just even saying, peak experiences are those things that take you to another elevation. So you can see from a different vantage point where you're at, right? So you're on the mountain, you look down and you see like the patterns below you, and you can see things much more than if you were at the base of the mountain. These peak experiences are, can range from medicine ceremonies to deep spiritual work to catastrophes, right? To tragedies in the family, to accidents, to health issues, to other crises, which not all good, right? We don't necessarily prefer these, but they count. Yeah. They are peak experiences.
Before you go to the last one, as you were saying it, I envision it, our life is on the flat surface, and then those peak experiences, whether they're good, you can look at it from above, or they're really bad and you look at them from above, but it's a similar idea.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it could be, it could literally be like the highs and the lows, right? But they're necessary, because if you don't have those experiences, I think you can't see where you're headed, perhaps, right? You're like, you don't see, you don't see the patterns and you don't see what's possible.
You're going to stumble a lot because you don't see where.
Exactly. And then, so that's really important. That's the second one. A third one is community and Sangha, which is something that, of course, that I've done a lot of. And for me, that has a lot to do with, people that can support you during the times like that you want to kind of go in a different direction. And the way I always said it was, community is about, you supporting, people supporting you. Community is about people supporting you when you're down, and they inspire you to keep going. And as importantly, it's your role in the community where oftentimes you're that person that is inspiring or keeping others, giving others the resources that help them continue on their path. So there's community, which another word for it is Sangha, in the Buddhist tradition, that's used a lot. And the last one, which is so fascinating that we don't really talk about it much, is a code, a moral code.
Okay.
Yeah, because for long-lasting transformation, a moral code, like what is good, what is right, what is appropriate, how do you want to live? And we kind of don't really talk about it in culture as much, but I mean, every religion had it, right? The 10 Commandments, the precepts in Buddhism, there's so many, because if you are on a path of transformation, to not have that inner compass of how to live rightly, you could be a sociopath, right? Like you could be doing ayahuasca ceremonies and have your practice, you have your community, and be a pretty horrible human.
Right.
Yeah. If that's not a part of the equation. And all of these, like all the religions past have had all four. Like just pick a religion, pick a tradition, a spiritual tradition, and they've had them. In this new world, we've disassociated so much from historical traditions for oftentimes for good reason. But I think it's really relevant if somebody comes to me and they say, like, I would really want to develop, to grow. I would point out all four of these. I'd say where are you at with all of these? They don't have to be from one tradition, but I think they're all fundamental in something sticking, like in actually building a life where it is self-actualized, where you are filled with energy and, you know, and joy and satisfaction. Like, how can you have it without, you know, these
I forgot the first one. So it's peak experiences, community, and
a code.
Morals, code. And then what was the first one?
Practice,
right.
So the four would be the four things that I think people need to have a fully self-actualized life are a practice, peak experiences, community, and then some sort of a code that makes sense to them and how they want to live their lives.
Yeah. And code is it like virtuous basically, like be a virtuous person.
Could be any of it. I mean, you can just pick the 10 commandments. Something that you are like really believe in. You know, for me, the number one thing I think that I choose, how I choose my people in my life, how I ultimately want to be in my life. I have a very, very simple one for me. It's just kindness. You know, like where possible, be kind. Is it always possible? Probably, but am I always going to get it right? Maybe not. But the intention is kindness. Like, you know, be kind to the Uber driver, be kind to your partner, be kind to your parents, to your kids. Like, if that's the only one, for me at least, I'm good with it.
Right. Yeah. So maybe we can touch on the other, community. I mean, Modern Home, the company that, the wellness brand that you've started is all centered around community. Maybe talk to me about some of the insights or some new knowledge that you've acquired by running this experiment, if you will.
Community is a fascinating word for me because I have been in the business of community. I've seen so many communities. I'm also part of so many communities. And I think that word has been co-opted, of course, by business in a lot of ways. And it's been used now in ways that, you know, like to monetize community and to use community as marketing and so on. So sometimes it's become a buzzword. And being so close to that, the source of what that actually represents has given me a lot of insight. And I think, so I'll start with saying that I think a lot of what people call communities are not communities. I think that real communities are groups of people who show care for one another. They know each other and show care for each other. And it's not your followers on a social media platform or your newsletter list. That's not a community. Although it is being called community and it will continue to be called community because because it's financially it is financially rewarded at the current time.
You're saying if there's some kind of financial incentive in a group of people, diminishes its ability to create a community.
That's another piece of it, I think. Yeah. I think my first point on it is that people will use the word community because in using the word, they're being rewarded financially. For example, if they need to have a sponsorship deck, oh, my community is this size. If they're having investors, this is my community, it's this size, right. So on and so on. Second point to what you just said may be that, you know, what does community look like when there's financial incentives to maintain that community? Oof. That's a big question. You know, perhaps it is a community, but the caveat is that there's financial incentives for somebody to have that community. So is it disclosed? Are people aware of that? How do people feel about that? I don't have answers to all of these, but these are interesting questions.
Yeah.
So for me, in fact, I'll share about Modern Home is I moved away from using the word community with Modern Home for these reasons. I also found that over time, yourself included, is people come through Modern Home, they find us, they get a lot of benefits. They really enjoy it. They meet people, and then they move along in their paths. And I thought to myself, wow, is that, if people like leave, is that a community, right? Isn't a community like they stick together, they hang out? And what happened, before COVID, through COVID, after COVID is just such a volume of people coming in, coming out, just a real flow.
Right.
And it's not it is a success. It's not a success. And so I thought to myself, maybe the measurement of community is not the right measurement, because that's about retention. That's how many people stay.
Right.
That's the stickiness of the group. Right. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is to share the value, to give the experiences. As a business, that's monetizable, obviously.
Yeah.
So I started moving away from calling Modern Home a community and started calling it a resource. Yeah. Because in looking at, in presenting it as a resource, both externally and also internally, it's about creating value that people can receive.
Yeah.
And they can come in and receive value from an experience, from a social event, from friends, and then they can go along their way. And hopefully they have nice things to say. Hopefully they enjoyed it, and they're welcome back whenever they need whatever they need again. And so is community formed within Modern Home? Absolutely. Are people still meeting their romantic partners, business partners, friend groups there? Absolutely. I happen to look at it now as a side benefit of it's like an external, I don't know if it's the word externality, but
like a positive externality. Is there a negative externality and positive? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a positive externality.
Yeah.
It's come do the things, enjoy it, and then if I see these people again and they say, which happened to me last weekend when I was at an event and somebody came up and they introduced me to somebody and they said, "Oh, by the way, meet such and such."
Yeah.
You go, "Oh, I met them last week at Modern Home."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Great, amazing."
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And
so you see, you call it now as more of like a resource in the very similar way what university would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's an organization that that supports the development of lots of things, right? Of like self in a university, people are studying, they're learning, and then they're forming bonds across each other. And then next year, it's like another group of people, and then another group of people, and another group of people. And so I never thought of it as like, thinking about in academic institution terms, but yeah, you don't hear universities saying like Harvard says, they have so many communities and clubs.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is the people in those communities there's a constant flow. The container is there. The chess club is a community formed of a particular 100 people in a given year. 2 years later, 50 of them have graduated and 50 new people have come. And so the container for the community, which is the chess club, maintains, but the individuals continually grow and shift, and it's the natural flow of things. And so I think that I'm very, like I said, interested in this notion of community and what is real community. And also, it's not just in the naming of it. It's not just a clinical exercise, academic exercise to like think about it.
Yeah.
It's what do we find value in? What do we want? Right? And what do we want as individuals? Like we find those groups that we align with, that feel good, that feel safe, that add value, that are exciting, that provide newness, right? I forget, Tony Robbins has a bunch of like these human needs or so on. And one of them is like newness or novelty. And that's relevant, right? So what that means in community too is, or in the model is, you want new members. Like you want like new members, new experiences. If it's the same 20 people getting together for 20 years, that's not even a community. That's like a family.
Yeah.
Right?
How would you then define, what's your definition of community?
To me, my definition in current state of community is that community is a group of people that choose to be together based around their values.
Yeah, one element I think which is important is there's a certain social contract that happens among members. They all agree to a certain underlying, and sometimes it's not like stated obvious. Like if you become part of it, it's like what's the word? Like a nonverbal social agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's I guess inherent in when I said based around values.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the values / social agreements. What is interesting about community that is an older model that I think is an opportunity for the current times is the leadership. The reasons many communities fall apart is because the leaders of these communities like can't hold their shit together, right? Especially when you come into, as communities grow, especially in the spiritual space or in the religious space, you have so many indiscretions that happen, particularly when the leader is a man. Mm-hmm. And that opens up like so many conversations and topics. But one of the things that I've found in a leadership role, but also in being a part of so many communities, is that many leaders they don't have the resources or the training to maintain their pull, maintain their position. What that looks like is, I'll give you an example in spiritual worlds.
Yeah.
Pick an Indian guru that came to the US. They all cracked. They all cracked. Bikram cracked. Osho cracked. Yogi Bhajan cracked. And it doesn't mean that their messages were not aligned and they weren't powerful and profound, that they didn't channel them, that they weren't based in thousands of years or hundreds of years of practice. Right. It's that at a certain point, you take an Indian man out of India and you put them, in these cases, into Hollywood. The different set of values, different set of dynamics, and they are just not prepared. Their egos are not prepared to cope with what that meant. Mm-hmm. And so that happened. Same exact thing with shamans, with South American shamans. Yeah. There's a lot of a lot of instances now where they crack because they're not prepared. They may have relationships with the sacred medicines. They're knowledge keepers in their own ways, but you take them out of that context and put them into New York City, and they,
amplify their ego, basically.
Yeah. And now you take, just forget the cross-cultural, or in addition to the cross-cultural examples, you just have people who they all of a sudden or over some period of time are put into positions of authority, and their egos are based upon that. And at a certain point, some of these people, they lose track of reality. They lose track of who they are.
Would you say then the amplification of ego gets in the way of this strength of the community? We should be so if we are in the business of building a strong community, we should be striving to keep the ego kind of at bay and not have practices that potentially exaggerated or something like that.
I would say, I would give a different perspective on it and just say that that exalting somebody is probably a mistake. Even if the message is beautiful and profound and beneficial, that message does not belong to the person. If you think of it in spiritual sense, that they're a vessel, they're a conduit of a particular source of information that is beneficial to you or to me, it is possible to honor that and to integrate it and then to look at the person and be like, thanks, Jim. Good one today. Jim is not extra special,
right?
Because
he's maybe extra sensitive.
He's extra sensitive,
right?
And Jim deserves and the respect and the accolades and like many things that somebody who adds value contribute. But by placing Jim into a particular category, Jim may not be capable of handling that much attention, that much money. That Jim may have never had an MBA. Jim may never have gotten attention from women. And all of a sudden, Jim is now in a particular position and Jim just can't handle it.
Right.
And I think that is relevant to know. I think that from a standpoint of spiritual communities, it seems to be more the norm than not, because what happens oftentimes is that they're built around a person or perhaps a couple of people. Sometimes it's a couple, right? For example, and then when the couple breaks up or things things get really dicey, and those have been happening. And I think that knowing that, right, and you can design around it. You can design around it because the real power of community is the message, right? It's the shared message, the shared beliefs, the shared agreements, the shared contracts that people have. And if the emphasis is placed on those,
right,
by the leadership, where the leadership says, hey, we're just doing this, for the benefit of or on behalf of, then, and we're going to get out of the way.
Yep.
And we're going to get out of the way. Then you got a shot, right? You got a shot of like really creating something that has longevity, that has purity. And, that's what I would like to see.
A question then. Do you see, let's say, it's a how would I call it? The term of like a more evolved community. Do you see it being a top-down, almost like a kingdom where there's a leader and they're spearing kind of like the way towards the common goal and common vision, or maybe there's a version where it's more like a decentralized group of folks who everyone is playing a role of a leader at any given moment, depending on the situation. They might be responsible for their own little thing. It almost, I see it as, let's say on the spaceship, everyone is a crew member, that everyone is playing their role in organizing like collective, good. And so what I'm seeing oftentimes is communities led by someone. Is that the ultimate state, or is that, do we maybe want to strive for a more decentralized community?
I love this question because we don't have, I'm not a true expert in community, like doing the research on it. Maybe people are looking at these exact questions. The
expert comes from experience, like you have a lot of experience though,
Yes. Yeah. I'm an expert in this way. I just don't I would be fascinated to read about this type of stuff to see what research is being done. I think that people really appreciate a leader. The leader is the translator in a lot of cases of values, of information. I think that the key is if the leader knows that they're playing a role, right? That their ego isn't identified with being a leader, but that they assume the vibration and the power of the leader, right? So they're assuming it for the benefit of, with the full knowledge that at a certain point that role gets assumed by somebody else. In a way, it's like, that's what is supposed to happen with our presidents in the US. They're the leader, and then at a certain point, that title, that role, that X handle is assumed by somebody else. right? That take over. So I think that is a model that can work. And it requires the right design and the right kind of leaders. I'm also super fascinated and have been fascinated by the decentralized model of community, especially when you think about blockchain and the way that, you can in the future or at current state, we haven't found the use cases for it that are, I don't think that they've really been established, but around like voting, interest, ownership, like if a community had an economic purpose and if everybody in the community could benefit from the activities, then that would change what I said earlier around economics and community. That would make a ton of sense.
Yeah. I see also a potential for something like AI to take in infinite amount of variables of participants in the community. Like everyone is its own universe of its own, the way they interact in certain situations, and you have to account for that when you're building an incentive structure that just makes sense and it optimize. So basically, we haven't come up with the decentralized incentive structure for a group of people that is optimized for whatever the goal that the group is pursuing. And maybe humans won't be able to come up with it on their own. Maybe we haven't come up because it's just so complex that we need tools like AI to just help us figure out, like we input billions of variables and it just figures out this is the most optimal configuration and this is how we should organize ourselves. Yeah.
I mean, AI has a role to play in many things and in most things, I would say, right? Like we were just saying earlier.
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested in the decentralized model because I see that the centralized model, it's quite toxic in many cases, quite toxic. And I'll give you a perspective on a personal perspective, why I think I'm a pretty decent community leader in my area is that my self-worth has been established prior to me having Modern Home.
Yeah.
I don't get a kick out of being the CEO of Modern Home per se. I don't think of myself in a higher regard because I've done other things in my life that are memorable. I have accolades, I have successes. And so I think
that are more satisfactory for your ego, maybe.
Yeah, that are more satisfactory to my ego.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I have shiny things that I can point to. And sometimes I point to them and maybe I don't. Or maybe that's my ego also. But importantly, as it relates to this, is it makes me a more egalitarian leader in this regard because I don't need the attention. I don't need the attention and I don't need the the affirmation around this. And I say this not just to speak about myself, but this is a model as well. It's like leaders who have done other things in their lives that are great or grand or important might be the model for leadership, right? Because it's almost like a psychological hack. Like, oh, you let your ego attach to the fact that you made $1 billion over here.
Yeah.
And now you're the governor of a state, for example. That happens pretty often. And maybe that person can be more chill about, they're like, I already did the thing. Like I already, I've already have, like spoke at conferences and everybody calls me and offers me business deals and this, and I'm doing this now out of service out of support. And the only reason that they could have such a view on it is because their ego, the itch got scratched.
Right. Exactly.
And so I think that's an interesting thing that I've thought about.
Yeah.
Because if it's the only thing you've ever done.
Right. Yeah. The chances of you, like using power in the wrong way, pretty high. The corrupting your position are going to be very high.
Yeah. So it's that's my community. Clearly, I've been thinking about this a lot because I care about it a lot. I think it's one of the pillars. It's there's a stated loneliness epidemic in the US. People are feeling very disconnected. I would say from themselves, from others, and that has huge implications on mental health, on well-being, in a general sense, and quality of life. And so these conversations around community could actually be really beneficial beyond simply, academically thinking about how it could be better or what's not working, because we need more of that. And in a world that is so disconnected, entirely, like attributable to technology, to the things that we currently have, and then now we add in more layers, right? Yeah. We're gonna add in and blockchain and so on, which is decentralized. We're gonna add in AR, VR. Yeah. You're gonna add in artificial intelligence, and then without really understanding how we're going to remain connected to each other, what are the systems that are going to be beneficial, benevolent, effective? What are we going to be left with? We're all going to be in our 400 square foot studios with a VR set strapped onto our eyes, with an avatar, walking around the outside that looks nothing like you, interacting with somebody else that might be an AI.
How likely do you think that vision, or maybe how likely, and then also what is your version of the future that is desirable for you, that you working toward, or that you contributing to?
That's a super big question, because the vision that I'm working towards is increasingly, I hope that people get comfortable with themselves. Because as I'm getting older and having birthdays and so on, I realize how not comfortable with myself I was. And now, as I do, the world changes. It gets more alive, more flow, more love. And so many people perhaps don't know they have resources, or they haven't experienced it, and that shifts how we live our lives. There's a lot of people that are chasing a lot of things, and they didn't choose. It's we come back to it. They didn't choose the things that they're chasing. They don't even necessarily want the things that they're chasing, but they are. And what kind of a life can that lead to? And so on a macro scale, it's really tough to say what can be, or the impact of one person or a community. But I think that there's a game inside all of us that we're playing that we can, it's not even about winning the game, but we can play the game. So it has nothing to do with winning. It has everything to do with playing. And if we don't activate that play within each of us, then we just miss the opportunity. It's there's an expiration date on all of us. So we may live our whole lives and not played the game. And that's not bad. That's just, if you would you choose that for yourself? Would you want to live your whole life never having played the game? I don't. It's freaking fun. Yeah. What if that's all there is? So
totally. Yeah. Man, I think this is a great place for us to kind of start wrapping up the conversation. I'd like to give you space to maybe point people to whatever resources you think would be useful, maybe the way they can find you, any recommendations that you have, any last thoughts.
Well, if you live in Miami, there's something called Modern Home. It's a business that I have. We do events all over town around meditation, spirituality, and come check us out. Otherwise, yeah, that's it. Find me on social.
Thank you.
Perfect.
This is how it goes. Yeah. So for those who are still around, thank you for sticking around and listening to the whole conversation. And I'll see you on the next one.